Cool.
Okay, good. I'm sorry. Yeah. Great. And it seems like you're really diverse with animation for products and a lot of your sticker sheets.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, how do I sound, John? Fine. My
Sorry.
audio, my audio comes in
Yeah,
fine.
you sound fine. I'm
Cool.
kidding.
Yeah. So I graduated with a computer science degree, like I said, and toward the end of that degree, I took a software development course. So I learned like a lot of, hardware engineering and robotics and software programming and stuff like that. And toward the end, I had to take a software development course where the project for me was to develop basically a website with, a whole bunch of databases and stuff like that. And what happened was my favorite part of that project ended up being the web design. I started making, the backgrounds, different colors, and I started really having to I started to have to choose, typefaces and fonts and stuff like that, and I really loved doing that, and that ended up being my favorite part of the project. And pretty quickly after, I mean, that was like the last class I had taken for my undergraduate, and almost immediately after, I really realized like that's what I loved doing was, I come from the world of skateboarding and music and stuff like that, and so aesthetic and visuals was always a major component to my life, and cartoons and all that stuff. But I just didn't realize that it could be a job. But I would organize the house. I loved organizing. I'd go through the cereal aisles and straighten boxes and stuff. I just loved
That might
order.
There's
And
medication for that if you're doing it, you know.
it was a lot. Like I definitely have like the obsessive component to OCD, I think, like really obsessive over stuff. And um design sort of ended up being a great way for me to kind of like have an output for that, to actually make things and not just be organizing the house or organizing toys on a shelf or whatever. So yeah, I got into it pretty quickly. And then, the web design kind of turned from like web design into, I realized like, oh, the website will need a logo. And then I realized, the website will need icons, and the website will need all these different things. Yeah, and then I went full fledged after that. And we can dig into, I'm an open book, so we can dig into the career of how it started and stuff like that. But I defer to you, John.
No, no, we'd love. Yeah, yeah, I defer it right back to you. Give us your whole story. Give us your backstory. Show us your work. Show us,
Cool.
yeah. I mean, an overview of your first projects is yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah, like I said, I'm an open book, and feel free to chime in, and obviously typing anything is fine. Super informal, so feel free to ask me any questions for everybody. But yeah, I can. Fortunately for me, it's only like, I guess it's 2021 now, so I guess it's been 10 years since I really started getting into it. But I can trace it back pretty easily to when it started. And it really did, like, just it was a matter of when I graduated, I started getting really obsessed with learning Adobe Illustrator. I had known Photoshop quite a bit just from nerdy days of, hanging out in forums and making avatars and signatures and stuff like that in forums. So I always, and same like video games, I loved, I would like take apart the code of video games and paint over the skins of the characters so I could make them have cooler t-shirts and things like that. So I always was kind of familiar with Photoshop and stuff like that. And what I wanted to do was I wanted to learn Illustrator just because I had seen um, some people that I thought were really cool and what they were doing, and what they were doing was in Adobe Illustrator. So I thought, okay, that's what I have to learn. And so I just did a bunch of tutorials. Like after I graduated, I remember I was really panicked about graduating school because I didn't have a job yet. And it wasn't the job that I was scared of, but I was afraid that I would lose my productivity because I wouldn't have a schedule. I wouldn't have like a rigid schedule. So I remember making like an actual, a calendar for myself every day of like, okay, wake up and from 7 to 8, you do this and have breakfast. And then I can go skate for a couple hours and do, I don't know how long the schedule really lasts. I didn't stick to it for that long, but
This is
I do remember.
right after you graduated.
Yeah, like, yeah, I mean, weeks after, and I I was just scared that I would stop producing stuff, I guess. And so I started doing a ton of tutorials through the week. Um, and what I would do is I would just copy the tutorials verbatim throughout the week, just do whatever they told me to do, not get creative with it. And then on the weekend, I would try to go into my notebook and find like an old sketch, like a doodle. Like I don't draw. I'm not saying this to be any sort of way. I don't think I draw super well naturally. It just not. I don't feel super confident in my drawing. But I always like, doodled like any of us do. So I would go back into my notebooks and find these doodles, and I would try to apply whatever I learned from that tutorial into this drawing or something like that. And so I would just do that. And I was fortunate enough that it was, 2011, 12, and there was a couple websites that were getting really popular, like Behance, and there's a website called Dribble, and at the time there was a website called Forest, like just these like social media, early on social media websites, and I just started sharing my work on there to try to get feedback and try to find a community, and basically like the first time I posted on one of the websites, somebody messaged me and asked me to make a poster for them for at the time. We can I'll find it. We can look at it if we want. But it was like they were doing in-flight alcohol, I guess, was kind of the whole idea, and it was very much like themed to have this like retro 50s style, and they just wanted me to do like this retro travel kind of poster of like a an interior of a big Airbus 380 airplane, and I lost my mind. Like I thought this is it. Like I can make an accountant. Like I was losing it. I remember going to my mom and being like, hey, like this is crazy. Who do I have to tell like the tax people? It was like, I got like $250 and I worked for like 40 hours on it. But it was a really big deal to me at the time. And I knock on wood and for a ton of fortune, and I'm so grateful for it, but I haven't stopped being busy since. Every month, week, day, whatever, like I've had work, I've stayed busy, and I haven't really had to look for the work. It's been a matter of just putting work out online and then waiting, and somebody will message me. And I've worked with the myriad of small businesses up to big corporations and stuff. And I say all of this stuff in an attempt to hopefully turn my career inside out so that everybody else can see from
Oh,
it
no,
and learn from
you
it and stuff like that.
But yeah,
So
things I'm curious. First of all, did you so you didn't need any day job when you first graduated?
yeah, I did. Sorry, yeah. So my timeline's a little wacky. I ended up, yeah, I graduated. So I was a server all throughout high school, which I attribute to the only reason I can speak at all. When I was, prior to that, I was like really like super quiet and like nobody could hear. It was just like I was very, very, very shy. And the serving job taught me how to, speak to people and try to smile and do that sort of stuff. And I'm really grateful for that. Um, and then once I graduated, I ended up hooking up with a guy that got me a job. I worked for his company. I met him at the hotel. I worked as a server at a hotel restaurant, and he was traveling for business. And I ended up meeting him, and he pretty much hired me on the spot. And I traveled the world with him for a couple of years doing video production. So it was like an online magazine that covered. I say on. I didn't know what I was doing for the first like 2 years I was working for him, because he always said online magazine. I was like, what's an online magazine? But it's just a blog, just like IGN.com or whatever. Like now it makes so much more sense. But in 2010, to me at least, it didn't make as much sense. Like, what are we doing? What do we do? We're like a blog, and we covered printed circuit board and microelectronics and stuff like that, which was or wasn't really my interest, but he knew
You
I was
fly
into
with him
tech.
to these places to do?
Yeah, we would go around basically like we were the media team that would go and cover something like, PAX or Comic Con or something like that, except it was not as cool. It was for, printed circuit boards and stuff like that. So it would be companies like, Samsung would be there, and Juki and Sony and stuff like that. But it was,
Like
about
the
solder
show
paste.
in Las Vegas? Was that one of your stops?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So the Apex show was the biggest one of the year that we would go to. Yeah, all the electronic shows. So we'd go to Las Vegas 2 times a year. We'd go to Texas. We'd fly to China. China was like frequent as well because there's a lot going on over there. Same thing with Germany. So yeah, I got a chance to like travel, and that also taught me how to like act in the world. I remember there was one point part, maybe it's getting boring, but I remember there's just like a point where like I met like some CEO that was like, worth $1 billion or something. And I was, sitting there like on the camera, and my boss came over. He's like, Kirk, I want you to meet this dude. And I'm like sitting, and I didn't stand up, and I just like shook his hand. I was like, hey man, what's up? And then later he was like, just so you know, if you ever meet anybody again, you always stand up when you shake someone's hand. And I was like, oh, I didn't know. He's like, you have no idea how embarrassing that was for me. Cause I was just like, yo, dude.
Good to put him in his place, it's good to.
Yeah, I guess, right? You need to take down a peg. Um, but yeah, so I did that for a couple years. And really, I mean, he was just paying me to learn and figure things out. And I did my best, but I wasn't probably the most valuable employee. But when I was traveling with him, I definitely was super valuable. But then during the day job, I was just like managing email lists and doing really nothing valuable.
So I'm
And
just
so I
curious,
was,
when you're
go ahead.
there at the play China, whatever, are you doing illustrations about the experience or the?
No, it was like I've probably never really drawn, like I've never carried a sketchbook. When I was in grad school with you guys, or you all, I was always so nervous that you were always drawing all the time. I never have been into it. I don't have sketchbooks and stuff like that. So I was at that point, I think every once in a while I would do like some of the advertisements for, because the magazine would have ads and banner ads and stuff like that. I would do some of that stuff, but that was the extent of it. But I never had a pencil with me or anything like that.
Uh-huh.
And yeah, so but I had a job, and that allowed me to just go crazy in the evenings. Basically, I was just working like a maniac, from 6 p.m. till midnight, just trying to figure out this freelance thing and taking little jobs here and there. Um, I did that for a couple years. That probably brought me to around 2014 or so. And I ended up hooking up with a company that needed some freelance illustration. And they ended up really loving working with me, and I loved working with them. And we kept working together until he finally was just like, yo, can we just hire you full time to be the creative director of the company? Like, everything about the business. Like, you're in charge of all the visuals. So you may as well just be the creative director. So I did that for a couple more years until 2015. All of the while, I'm also doing freelance stuff at night. I'm working a lot. In 2015, I quit full time to pursue freelance. That was, yeah, 15, maybe it was 2016. It was just around when I decided to start the program and get the master's. When I decided to quit my job and also get a master's degree at the same time, which was maybe dicey, but I think I had a little bit of that imposter syndrome, thinking like I can't do freelance full time if I didn't even have an undergrad in drawing. Like I didn't even know how to draw. I didn't know figure drawing or anything like that. So that brings us to today. I quit and I got the master's, and so far, knock on wood, I've been busy and happy.
Oh, great, great. Well, screen
So
share, show us some stuff.
cool. Um, just checking through the chat to see if there's anything that I'm
Oh, I see 10. Yeah.
missing.
Professor Lemon, you can speak up with a question too. We have a.
Yeah, anyone, please.
I'm enjoying just lurking, and I love your tale. It's so real, from here to there to this step to that step, never knowing what's going to happen next.
Thank you.
And it's great.
Yeah, no, it's been like very. I often say, I think if I had gone to undergrad for art, I think I probably would have gotten discouraged, because they would have taught me that I have to learn charcoal and all of these things like that. And I wouldn't have been good at it. And I would have realized like, oh, I can't be an artist. I can't be an illustrator. I'm not good at it. But I think like coming in from like the side with like this sort of chip on my shoulder and like having no idea what I'm doing, I guess maybe it just chalks up to like ignorance is bliss or something. But yeah, I really just like came in out of nowhere and was like, I didn't know the rules, but therefore I wasn't nervous to break any of the rules. So my path is very tipsy turvy, like you said, Anne. Let me share.
Oh, you said we'll get to this later too, but it was Beyonce when you first started. Like,
Yeah.
like what websites have you seen come and go, or what platforms
Sure.
are currently, like when we were in school a couple years ago? Was Is it still Instagram still up there, or?
Yeah, that's a great
TikTok?
question. So that's another awesome point is that like I'm just gonna share my screen so we can look at something other than my face. But yeah, at the time I used Behance a ton, Dribble, and those I still use them, but people ask me often, especially students, like, how do I get started today? And I really can only speak to like I know how to get started in 2011 and 12, but I just don't know what I would do today. I mean, I guess I would be like pushing into the world of TikTok and things like that is it's weird. I mean, I start feeling, like an old curmudgeon where I'm like, I don't get it. I don't know how to do that stuff. But I still get a heavy amount of work from, uh, I would say Behance and that website called Dribble. Um, and I think fortunately at this point, my name's around enough-ish that my portfolio gets a decent amount of traction, and I think I attribute a lot of my work that I get to the case studies that I put on my website and the way that I kind of formulate my projects on my site. I really try to put a lot of effort into that, and I think that helps a lot to show that I don't do a lot of work, John. You know that I don't do a large amount of small things, but I do few amounts of in-depth projects and stuff like that. So I try to make sure that clients and art directors and stuff like that understand the way that I think and the way that my brain works, and therefore I sort of get that type of work in return. I don't do any editorial stuff. I don't do much for quick turn stuff. I just can't produce that quickly.
Huh.
But what I do work on is these sort of like long form, deep dive projects for brands, which we can kind of dig through if it's of any interest to anybody.
It's of absolute interest.
um, yeah, anybody feel free to chime in with whatever. But so the last couple, so I mean, this is sort of the world of which I'm operating in for work. Um, and the last couple years, I've really tried to take a deeper dive into working with clients on sort of, I'm calling them like, um, illustrated brand direction. So oftentimes companies will come to me and they'll have, their brand, their identity done, their logo, the sort of tone of voice that they want to capture for their product. But very frequently they'll have all that done, but then they'll have kind of a weaker um, illustration language. It's usually an afterthought.
Huh.
So what I try to really do is take a deep dive and understand like, okay, what are the pillars of your company and the product, and how are we trying to convey ourselves, and how can we find a style that's relevant, unique, and ownable to you, um, and valuable to you as a result. And so, we kind of these are like month-long projects, 2 months sort of thing, where we're really for me, I'm writing before I'm even drawing, and I'm really prescribing the right, um, solution to the problem first, and then we start drawing and coming up with ideas and stuff like that. But this is, one that we did, or I say we, well, friends of mine that help, but also, the client and stuff. But um, yeah, I mean, this is the world that we're operating in. This was kind of the idea was basically it's a payroll company, so it's a software company that runs payroll for companies, and there's plenty of companies similar to it. ADP would be the one that we would know the most, and they're all kind of boring and sterile. And so we decided to kind of zig when others were zagging and go with this more warm, kind of kids book inspired illustration style that is just really not seen in the tech world. Like this is very familiar probably to a lot of people here in this room right now because it's so inspired by kind of kids books and stuff like that. But when you're in the world of Facebook and these tech companies and payroll, it's just not a very familiar uh, visual, which is great because the client was totally willing to take that chance and have something a little bit more weird.
And these would
Um,
be on their website and their catalog, on their social media.
yeah,
Is all of the above, I guess.
yeah, exactly. All of the above. The first sort of the scope was I think we did like 11 illustrations for their homepage first, to kind of outline their features and their core values and stuff like that. But what happened was, we came up with, I think it was the pizza one that we did first. So this was like the one that kind of set the tone of like, we want to get small businesses back to why you ever decided to make a small business to begin with. Like, you start by like wanting to throw pizza with your buddy, but then next thing you know, you're gonna do taxes and all these things. And like, that's not fun. So we're gonna help you get back to like hanging out with your buddy, throwing dough. So this really set like the tone. And then as a result, like we came up with an iconography language for it that's, based on the illustration direction, but not completely mimicking it. And then, coming up with some identity stuff, some product abstractions, photography styles, all this kind of stuff that all rolls out as a result of the illustration. So like I said, it's illustrated brand direction. So the illustration is really the anchor that carries the whole project forward. But then as a result, we come up with, other things as well, these visual motifs. And
Now, do you ever have to
that,
sign like a non-compete, like you can't do illustrations for any other payroll company? So if they want-
yeah. So fortunately, yeah, I mean, it's definitely the world I'm in. I've pushed back on contracts frequently. I've sent contracts back marked up in red saying, I'm not doing this and that. But I got to say, this Wage Point is one of my favorite clients, and they wouldn't ever try to pull that with me. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely the world that I'm in is sort of those kinds of things of non-competes. But I've never signed a contract that had any sort of non-compete, other
Okay.
than like when you work with Apple or something, you really get into like, it's like really, you don't negotiate with Apple. But otherwise, I've had no bad contracts.
Oh, great. Yeah, I've had times
Um,
when almost they give you a boilerplate and they don't even know what's in there. They just
yeah, exactly.
that's like, I've had literally ones that say, you can't, you know, it can't be. They want to say international, so they say anywhere else in the universe, literally,
Yeah.
and you can't do for media not yet invented. They've had
Yeah,
like
it's
that.
crazy. And they're just like, they just have a lawyer write that up and like throw it your way. And they give the same thing to developers, as copywriters, as designers, as illustrators. Like, and anytime I've ever pushed back on a contract and been like, this isn't the way I work, usually they're like, oh, we didn't, like, honestly, we are like, they don't even really know what's in their contract.
Oh,
And I take a lot of pride in marking contracts up and sending them back and saying, change this and that, and
oh, good, good.
seeing what I can get away with.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I mean, I work in all sorts of different, I think it's the style drives the work that I get, as opposed to, I don't work particularly in kids books or in tech or in things like that. I'll work, in printed goods. This is a blanket that I did. Um, so I don't know, at risk of, I don't want to just kind of flick through my portfolio and show all the stuff I've done, but I think it's interesting in that while I do work with a lot of sort of tech companies and stuff like that, um, this was a kid's product that I worked with, and a lot of it I think is driven more by the method and the psychology and the philosophy that I work, and the style, rather than only working in a particular industry or something.
So you don't see a kids book in your future? I mean, it seems like you'd fit right in.
I get really stressed out really easy, John. like
Really?
it's a lot of drawing to do. I mean, if you notice, most of my work exists on, but I got to get better at understanding that like kids' books don't have to be quintessential like background art and stuff like that. But like most of my work is really just on a white background with like an abstracted sort of viewport. Just because I get a kid's book just really stresses me out. Of like, it's a lot of drawing to do, and but maybe, maybe I can get better at understanding like a kid's book doesn't have to look like anything special, right? It can look like anything. But
Yeah, I mean, there's all types. I mean, there's all- especially now, it seems like there's more variety than
yeah,
even early chapter books that have like one picture every couple of pages or little just little
sure.
kind of accents.
Yeah, I love working with spots. Like, if I can do vignettes and spots all day, that's one thing. But as soon as I start getting into the world of background, I just really start getting super stressed out.
Okay, I don't mean to give you PTSD.
um, but yeah, I mean, all of these projects also are sort of, hopefully the idea is that they're a resource for me as sort of a a postmortem to wrap up a project and think about them a little bit more, but they're also, a resource for people to look at. And I try to break down as much of the process as possible so that people can see.
Oh, it's cool. So
Um,
they made that mascot suit from your drawing.
yeah, full on. So I worked with this company for the last couple of years, and I worked back and forth with the fabricator to, we tested out like swatches of fur and all that kind of stuff. It was really fun. They're like mailing swatches back and forth, and I'm like, yeah, I think it needs to be more fluffy. And I'm like, I don't really know what I'm talking about, but I've got an idea in my head. So yeah, I came up with, this character, basically a mascot for this product. And they ended up making it into like a full blown character. Uh, the same company that made like the Utah Jazz and like all of those mascots ended up working on this project. So it was really fun. It's pretty high quality, and it's a hit at the conferences and stuff. So yeah, we've done a bunch of different stuff for this guy, and
Oh, cool.
I had this like poor lady like we had all these like test furs and fabrics and stuff, and the client was asking if the fabricator will send some process photos. So there's got this little lady standing in it with her socks on. I thought it was so funny. But she actually, so it's always fun too. I always try to like incorporate, this isn't anything ingenious by any stretch, but like it's always fun kind of integrating a little bit of like the engineering brain
Oh,
for
sure.
me into things. So like looking outside of the nose was an idea that I had, of like, rather than looking out of the eyes. So we did like a screen over the nose that was black, so you can't see the face, but they can see out of it. Um, so I'm always trying to like incorporate some sort of like cleverness or engineering aspect. But this is where it all starts. Like I said, this isn't fishing for anything, but like, I don't draw that super great. These are just kind of as far as I need to go, is just this kind of exploration that I'll do. And then I'll start bringing it from, so this might be in like Procreate or Photoshop or whatever. And then I'll go from there into Adobe Illustrator, which would be kind of in here. And I just knock out, we can open up files and stuff. We can dig through my hard drive if it's interesting, but
It's just assume. Go with the assumption everything's
so yeah, so I'll play with this, and I always keep my colors really simple color palettes. And this is sort of his first stab that we went with. So this would be all Adobe Illustrator, and then a little bit of texturing and lighting and post-processing that would be done in Adobe Photoshop, but pretty subtle in the grand scheme of it all. It's just a little bit just to try to remove a little bit of the that digital sterile feeling. I always want my illustrations to still have that warm, kind of cozy, textured feeling.
So that's why you bring it into Photoshop to bring in some texture? Is that a
Yeah, just so it feels like I'm just trying to trick people into thinking that I actually painted it or something. But
you won't tell me
let's
that.
see if there's any others.
We enjoyed your little Scully movie up there.
Oh, did you all watch it?
Yeah, it seems like a whole team of people worked on it too. Is that
Yeah, that was a thesis project for the masters. Yeah, it was my two best friends from childhood helped me write it, or three friends helped me write it, and then an animator from New Zealand who's a really great friend of mine. And I basically did all the artwork and animation, and he did all of the animation, and
oh,
then those same friends that helped write it did the sound.
I saw someone else's name pop up for the other animated thing. So he helps you with animation or just
Yeah, Latham Arnott. He's like a super dear friend of mine. I met him through that website Dribble. We just connected through like commenting on each other's work, and then ended up chatting over Skype a bunch. And we've been friends for like 6 or 7 years now. I've been to New Zealand to hang out with him. He's been here. But pretty much any of the animation that's on the website, chances are it's Latham that's done it. My animation skills are really limited, especially compared to others. I can do a lot of stuff, but it's just really slow for me.
like your little Bonehaus guy at the top, a little
Latham.
yeah, that's wow, okay.
Yep. Yeah, I think we'll do an audit, but I think everything that's on here is probably Latham. This is just another process that I thought might be a little bit interesting to see, just the way it kind of starts and goes. So just like a really rudimentary sketch goes into Adobe Illustrator. So like I change things a ton when I'm in Illustrator too. Like it went from this to this very quickly.
Huh.
So it's just all in outline mode, and then this would be the flat colors. But I'm really like continuing to play with the shapes and the eyes and things like that and color, because I'm really non-committal overall, but also when it comes to this stuff, I just, I go from this to this just by nudging things around and playing with all of the points. And then, yeah, in Photoshop ends up being like that.
Oh, wow. That was good. That was one of the reaction pieces, right? Was that the New York reaction piece?
Yeah, this was, I think, one of the only ones that Bill liked.
Oh, really? You know?
He said I have a genius way of using shapes in that time, and then all the other ones I think he was a little not as impressed. But this one was a slam dunk for a lot of people.
Oh, cool.
I think, but yeah, I mean, anybody, like I said, questions and stuff are super welcomed. Or if there's projects in particular that we want to dig through, open up files and stuff too, we totally can.
Just pick one. You lead us. This is your
Okay.
your backyard, so you.
Let me see if I've got this one kicking around.
How'd you come up with Scully? Was that just a doodle you like to do, and ended up being your kind of your trademark or your?
So that was a good friend of mine helped. I work with I've met a lot of really great people throughout all of what I've done. And a really great Boston identity designer named Richie Stewart. And I became really good friends when I started kind of getting into the design scene, I guess, if you will. And we met and bonded really, really hard over music and skateboarding and stuff like that. And when I was going to go full-time freelance, I wanted to have like a moniker. I wanted to have the Bonehaus moniker to work under. And I asked him just to do some just play around with some lettering and stuff like that for me. And he ended up, I had this idea. I was like, I kind of like this idea of like a skeleton, but I really don't like a lot of things that are skeletons, when it turns into like more Harley Davidson kind of skeletons. So I like had that. I'm like, I kind of like cutesy Casper the Friendly Ghost skeleton kind of world, and gave him just like this plethora of ideas. And he ended up like coming up with this prototype of Scully as the little sort of trademark symbol. And we sort of worked together on that for a while, and ended up falling in love with Scully. And then from there, I ended up blowing it out and turning him into the more animated character that we've seen somewhere on the website. But a lot of collaboration overall for
Sounds
what
like
I
it.
do.
Yeah. Very similar.
Yeah, it took me a long time to really find like the power in collaboration. When you grow up like being decent at drawing or whatever, everybody's always saying like, you should, I got this great idea for a kid's book, or I got this great idea for an app, or all these things. And you're just like, the last thing I need is ideas. Like I need time. I need more time. Like I don't need you telling me all these cool ideas you have. And it was actually Latham who, when I met Latham, not to say I've never collaborated in a positive sense in my life or anything, but Latham came along and he messaged me on that site and was like, hey, I'd love to, can I animate some of your stuff? And I was like, sure, of course. I gave him files. And a couple days later, he sent me a little gift back of this. Let's see if we can find it. But he gave me something back that was just like, it just injected so much life into something that I wasn't anticipating. Oh, here, it literally is right here. So I sent him just this knife and a pepper and was like, here you go, man, see what you want to do with this. And he, the fact that he had it chopped twice just like completely blew my mind. I was like, I never thought like, he totally pulled this kind of Fantasia aspect into it. And this is, he'll forgive me. This is, 6 or 7 years old now. So it's not his finest work, but I just was like, whoa, this is crazy. Like you made my work so much better. Like what else can we do? And I was just like, I wanted to just give him all of my files and see what else he wanted to play with. And him at the same time, he not being as strong as an illustrator at the time was like, this is amazing because I have all this artwork that I can animate. And so I was like, this is a good teamwork. Like this is
Wow.
not somebody saying, hey, I got this great idea for a kid's book, and then like I have to draw 40 pages of illustration. Um, this was like, it really opened my eyes to it. And then the same thing when I started working with Richie on the identity stuff. And I was like, oh, he's much better than I am at thinking about logos and typography and stuff. So yeah, it's those like little moments that I definitely don't think I'll ever forget. Yeah, that's the first thing that we did together. Let's see if we need a time.
Is he using Photoshop
Working.
there or
This was all done in Adobe After Effects.
After Effects? Okay.
Yeah. So let's see. I can open up like
Error.
Yeah, so this BLM piece that I did a little bit ago has a reasonably interesting process because I use a lot of smart objects in Photoshop to work between Illustrator and Photoshop. And it might be handy to sort of showcase. Might not be the perfect example, but it'll be all right.
I gotta open up my mind to smart objects. I kind of resent anything that Photoshop tries to do that.
You just can't.
Away from me.
So let me try to find. So that this file is really messy because it's a personal piece that I did. So therefore, it's really not. I didn't label it that well. But this is the workflow that I'll kind of go through. Is we're in Illustrator now. So I'll build everything out in Illustrator using a lot of groups. I don't use layers. I just go with groups because they're just as good for me. And I can always, double click into my group. And then very frequently, and not in this case, but because I'm so used to animation, I'll also like group, a whole arm. That way I can more easily, rotate that arm because like I said, I'm not super great at like, if I'm going to draw somebody throwing a baseball, it's probably going to be like this the first time. And then what I'll do is I'll draw it. And then in Illustrator, I'll really like start pulling it back a little bit more and exaggerating my poses. Just because when I sketch it out, I usually don't quite have those dynamic poses that I should. So things like this are really handy for me to be able to push poses a little bit further. And that's why rather than drawing this whole body as one shape, I make sure this arm is separate. That way I can come in and, move this arm however I wanted to. If I want to hear more like this, I can kind of rig it that way. So I use a lot of groups when I'm doing it. And, but otherwise it's just basically, I just pen tool everything. You can see this is the outline mode of the tool. It's a little messy because it just looks uglier because there's a white outline that's making everything look duplicated. But so I'll just like, draw through my shapes like, if I were drawing her head, I've got a sketch underneath, and that I'm tracing over, but I'll just, pen tool it out like this. I'll usually do it with like a black line and no fill like this and just go over the whole thing. Just the line work first usually, and then come up with something of, a loose color palette that, obviously won't be exactly this color palette, but, I'll have some colors like this. And once I've got, my line work like this, I'll just, grab this head shape and say, okay, I want it to be this color. And I use a lot of the eyedropper and just drop color in. And I really fuss with it for a long time. Like it's really ugly until it's good. Which I don't know. I don't know if people hear that enough, and I hope they do, but it really like, it takes a long time for it to even look remotely good. And the only difference between, when I was starting and now is I understand the process where like when it's really ugly for 6 hours, I'm like, I know that this will eventually get good. Whereas before I was like, there's no hope here.
The students in this class, I mean, almost everything's ugly, so they're really on the wall.
So you're all
I'm doing my job. It's even ugly. Yeah, it's great.
You just got to go a little bit further.
By example. So.
So I build everything out kind of like this. And I arrange, my compositions are never the most brilliant by any stretch immediately. And I nudge and move things around. I'm pretty you know, well known for my tangents and stuff like that. So nudging is really helpful for me because, you know, this sun, I'm sure, is, you know, pointing to that elbow, and I'm sure before it was even worse. So I nudge things around a bunch. And then what I'll do is I don't want to make this into a total tutorial or anything, but what I'll do is I'll just copy all this artwork from Illustrator and then come into Photoshop and literally one paste it. And then when I paste it, I say smart object. And what that allows me to do is, so I basically just have this layer, and this is just all the painting that I do on top. Like I said, it's not a ton, it's just a little bit of grit and texture. But the nice thing is if I double click on the smart objects, I can come in and say, you know, I want anything I want to do, but if I wanted this sun to be smaller, I can do that. I click save. And then when I come back into Photoshop, it updates like that.
Huh. Wow.
And so it saves me a lot of time because then, you know, all of the texturing and post-processing and the lighting and stuff like that I do to it is still, you know, in there for the most part. You know, some things have to get nudged around. If that had a lot of texture on it, it might lose some of the texture. But in general, it helps me, especially with revisions with clients. If, you know, maybe someone's nose is too large or their ears are too big or something, I can really easily just kind of go in, tuck them down a little bit, make them smaller, and not have to redraw a whole lot of stuff.
So when you add the texture in Photoshop, you bring it back into Illustrator and it's there in Illustrator. Oh.
So Photoshop is where I'll export the JPEG in the end. So I'll go Illustrator into Photoshop, and then sometimes I bump back and forth between Photoshop and Illustrator. But every time I'm popping back into Illustrator, well, there's the texture on the edge here,
Sure.
but that's just a roughen effect that I'll put over the vector stuff, just to shake up the line a little bit, basically. But yeah, that's just basically it's this distort and transform roughen. And what you do is you just bring the size down a ton, because normally what you'll do is you'll see it and it'll be like this, and you think it's useless. But then if you bring it down a bunch, you can get just this really subtle ripple to the artwork. And that just helps it, you know, get a little bit more gritty. Yeah, and then I just paint, you know, I just use whatever brushes are in Photoshop, you know, the Kyle Webster brushes, or now they're just Adobe's brushes. And I paint with a Wacom tablet and just, you know, brush in a little bit of gouache and dry brush and speckles and stuff like that, and then export. That's really all my process is.
Wow, well, you got it nailed. It's great.
Yeah. So, but like I said, Illustrator's where it's at. Good.
Oh, cool. Definitely. Well, tell us about the world of stickers too, because we're doing a sticker/emoji unit, and like we saw your sticker sheets, and just
yeah,
like even what form. Like I wasn't sure. Do I have them create them like, you know, 8x10 at 300 DPI, or
right,
or you know, and do they, like, do you just, like, even the way Chris Piazzik does when they're all ganged up on a sheet, do they like lift them off there? Like how does
so what I'll work, you know, kind of frequently in like icon design, or, you know, stickers and emojis and stuff like that. It's sort of a frequent you know, job that I'll get hired for, and I think it's a really great culmination of the design world and illustration. You know, there's one thing if you're really wonderful at painting and doing all of these crazy oil paintings, but if you can't get it down to size and have it read at a small icon, then it's kind of useless. So I think the sort of graphic design aspect of my interest helps with that. This is a set of emojis that I did for a website called Ravelry. They're like an online knitting community. A really big one. Like they've got millions of users. It's pretty interesting and neat. But they hired me to come up with a style of emoji, basically, and I think I ended up doing like 200 or 300 icons for them.
Wow.
But
I told them if they were doing simple ones, they had to do a dozen. I should have killed myself.
The trick was for me was coming up with you know, so this is like some of the style development that I did early, and they, you know, they knew that they wanted to do something kind of like lumpy and handmade, because they're like a handmade community, all about knitting and crochet. I knew I wanted them to be a little bit imperfect, So what I did was I just come up with like some really simple rules, and the more simple the rules, the better. But as long as you follow with those rules, then you end up with something that is consistent. So, I just have these like certain little loose threads that I'd pop into some of them, and use yarn where I could, and gave myself rules about when I use black line, um, and the way that I use shapes. And I can open this file up too. Let's see how. Yeah, so here, same kind of thing. Well, actually, what I'll do is I'll have like a really messy artboard too. Let me find one that's a little bit messier for everyone to see, so it doesn't look so perfect. But like, yeah, maybe it's more like this to start, of like, bring in some references and things that I like, and I'll end up, I'm noodling for a long time. One of them was a frog I had to do. So I'm like, all right, first let me just figure out how to draw a frog. And then I'm trying to play with, how this frog's face is going to work. How is it going to work in such a small scale? So these were going to be, and this was just because of the calling of the client, these are going to be 32 pixels by 32 pixels. So they're going to be like really small. And they might even, some of them are going to be 16 by 16. So really, really small. So that's why I built them in Illustrator, because it's way easier to scale them. But I know that I have to be really simple with a lot of these things, and really intentional with contrast with the colors and the way I use line work and stuff like that. So, this frog isn't going to cut it, because when this frog gets, down to a certain size, it's not nearly as clear that it's a frog as, when it's this one. So playing around a lot with that stuff. For me, it makes sense to work in Illustrator, but anybody can work in anything. The idea is just making sure that you're always zooming out, and you're always testing these icons at whatever native size they're going to be. Usually when they're kind of like the stickers and stuff like that, they're small, they're thumbnail kind of, they should look good on your phone is always a nice way to test it too. Sometimes I'll just message them to myself on my phone so I can see them on that. But yeah, I'm just like exploring, like I'm like just drawing emojis as well, just to like, I just have to get in the habit of like understanding kind of the language first, and playing around with like, okay, what if, what does knitting look like? What do all these different things look like? Do I want outlines? Do I not want outlines? And then, I bring them over and I start building out this whole set. And they're all pretty simple. They're just, this is just a shape. And I do a little bit of I don't even think you could really call it hand lettering. I'm just, drawing my letters with the pen tool, and just going along. And I think by nature of like, because I made every one of these, they sort of all have this, I'm not super fussed about what is the lettering going to look like for new. I just know like, okay, draw it the way Kirk draws it, and it will generally look the way it should look. And then, I can refine it later, because I'm sure the first time I drew this E, it probably looked like this. And then what I can do is just play with all of my vector points and just taper things in and make them right until I get it exactly the way that I want to. And this can be detrimental to me very often, because I'll noodle with details on things that just nobody's going to see. So, Illustrator can be dangerous, because you end up like really fussing over like, oh, this thing's bumping out a little bit, let me move it. But then you realize you're working on like, a 40-foot mural, and like, you're like, oh, none of this matters.
Yeah.
Like no one cares if like what the hair looks like on that one guy is going to be a half an inch big. But for a project like this, it was handy, because, I get to make every coin. But I just, use a lot of primitive shapes and a lot of pen tool.
It's funny when you made that
things
E,
out.
like the first time before you fixed it, it looked like your it looked like your style. Just the E. It was like your thumbprint was there. Or whatever.
Yeah, the style comes through in like Illustrator, which is interesting for me. It's like, that's my tool, which I was sort of I don't want to quite say ashamed of, but yeah, like, it's not drawing in the traditional sense. So sometimes I feel a little bit self-conscious that like I'm not a real artist, or that because I'm not using gouache paints, or because I'm not using all of these different things. I get a little bit self-conscious, but it does come through. Even, people say digital loses a lot of that personal touch. But I don't necessarily think so. I think it's just a different language. I grew up a little bit later, and so therefore digital was that much more at my fingertips. And the way I put all of my keyboard shortcuts, I slide them all over on my keyboard, so everything is like from here over, all my keyboard shortcuts. That way I can just work with my left hand and do all of my shortcuts, and then use my pen or my mouse with my right hand. And that way I don't have to move around the whole keyboard, and I can work a lot faster.
So
And I
you
think that,
customize your keyboard shortcut?
yeah, so I'll just change everything, because I was sick of, move the pen tool was P, and I'm so sick of like moving my hand all the way over there and then not being able to see it. But now if I just have everything set to like all of the buttons around my hand, then I don't have to move my hand around, and I can work that much quicker. And I think that comes from like the computer science sort of background in me, and video games. That was something that I would do in video games, was like, I'm used to like, I would, keyboard and mouse, and I would have it like that. So it's just kind of bringing my whole world into the artwork, rather than, I don't know, taking it at face value or something. But yeah, I mean, I'm happy to hear you say that, John, of like, I feel like style can come through in digital just as well as, maybe not just as well, but certainly can come through. Even in my goofy ease.
What's just the proportions or something about it was like a.
Yeah, there's just like, it's a, the pen tool for me is a second language, or a native language to me at this point. But I was teaching digital for a couple years, and trying to teach people the pen tool the first time, it's just like, I'm sorry, I know it sucks, like just stick with it, like you'll get it. It's just, there's no easy way to learn it. It's just a nightmare to start. But yeah, so I mean, for me, I worked in Illustrator when I made, these, and I did those Facebook props and stuff to put on. I don't know if they even still use these on Facebook or not, but at the time they wanted these like props for baseball and stuff like that. But this is the same thing. I did all of these in Illustrator, and then there's a little bit of texture, like in this, just that brush. And I'm literally like, I do everything in Illustrator, and then I just come in at the end and bring it into Photoshop and just do like one quick brush stroke with a dry brush. But 90% of it's Illustrator.
And you submit it as JPEGs to in the end they're submitted.
They asked for PNG, probably transparent background PNGs, so that way they have the alpha channel transparency. That way you can put them on top of things.
Oh, that's PNGs would be the way to the final file.
Yeah, PNGs are probably, I mean, we can look. This is
I thought it was also interesting with your sticker sheet, the way you kind of, I mean, you talk about not wanting to do a picture book, but you kind of did a picture book with the little sequence, the camera.
Oh yeah, that was fun, because they that was, let me just pull that up. That was the first time they had done a sequence of, they asked me to do a set of stickers. Facebook emailed me and wanted me to, where are they? They asked me to do a set here. Where the heck did I get them off my website? Maybe I did. Bear with me. Oh, here they are. Yeah, they wanted just like arbitrary stickers of different emotions. And I was like, what if we tell like a little story throughout it of like, he wakes up, he's got nothing to do, and then he's actually stoked that he has nothing to do, and he decides to go camping, gets frustrated, and in the end,
slow down, Charles.
Yeah, he gets all excited, he decides to go camping, breathes in the fresh air. But the idea of the project, of course, was we want different emotions, because when you're using Facebook Messenger, you want to send grumpy faces or happy faces or scared faces.
Oh, okay.
So I was trying to come up with this clever way of naturally coming up with all these different emotions, rather than just like an arbitrary face that's sad. I wanted a reason and a motive to why the character would be sad. So I came up with this kind of story where, yeah, it's great, fresh air, that's nice. But then he gets, pissed off because he has to build a tent, and the tent's called an easy tent. And then, he's lost. So I'm trying to think of, I'm obviously looking at other sticker packs as well for inspiration of what the emotions are. but yeah, I'm trying to think of like, oh, confused, puzzled. Okay, if he's confused, maybe he's lost. Maybe he can't figure out his compass. Um, so yeah, he does all these things. He ends up having like a really bad time. He's really excited to be by himself and be out in the wilderness, but he ends up lost. He ends up scared. He ends up, drowning, and he's like,
That's
"This is fucking awful. I don't want to be a part of this anymore." He's scared, and then he realizes that there's a dog, um, and the dog loves him, and then he ends up having a really good time, and he goes on adventures with the dog, and it was never that he needed a day off. It's just that he needed a friend,
oh my gosh,
and
there you a
they
story
make
right
and then yeah, and I think this one did well. I don't know. I was told that it got a lot of usage um, when the pack came out. This was years ago now, so I don't even know if it's still around. But um, yeah, it was fun to tell a story, and um, it did a little bit of visual development, I guess, trying to keep color palettes really simple, keeping a lot of contrast. These are going to be really small.
Now, did you get a sense of the users, like the people who used it? Did they use it as a story, or did they just use, oh, here's a happy pic for the happy scene,
mm,
or they just kind of enjoyed looking at the story themselves and just use the emotions as they wanted?
yeah, it's a good question. My knowledge is that people are using them sort of arbitrarily, but when they are seeing them laid out, they're seeing them in a story. So I think they're getting the fun out of them being a full story, but they're being used. There's metrics on these things. It's ridiculous, the metrics that they have. It's
Huh.
this one got 14 billion uses, and like it's
Oh my god!
unbelievable amounts of like usage things that Facebook has. But
And you get like what dollar every time someone uses it, something like that.
oh boy, I wish. um, but yeah, they kind of tell you which ones perform better and which ones people are using, and I think I don't remember any of it, but I know that it was about what you'd expect. It was usually like the like excited ones are the ones that people use the most, and things that are positive, like the extremes, like really happy or really sad, are like the ones that people kind of identify with the most. Um, but yeah, Facebook was probably one of the first projects that I worked on that where I had an art director that really was awesome. Like this was a while ago now, but I was working with art directors that really knew what they were talking about. Whereas before, everybody would just kind of give, to me, now the most valuable feedback. Once I started working with Facebook, they really knew like how to push these and make them better, and it
Oh
was really
wow,
fun,
that's cool.
exciting. Yeah, it was a rare instance where art direction was useful. Usually, it's just a pain in the neck.
My son's out in San Francisco, and his girlfriend works for Facebook. I guess she
All right,
works
on.
for their. I guess they have a streaming platform, which I didn't know, but I guess she's kind of in charge of that or high up with that. It's yeah, it sounds
They've got
fascinating.
everything now.
What's that?
They're taking, they've got everything.
I
They're
guess
they're
so. Yeah,
taking
and
over for
everyone's
sure.
watching it. I guess Jada Pinkett Smith has a show on. I guess that's their biggest show. Last I heard, anyway.
Yeah, that makes sense. I visited the campus once when it was when we were out there in
Yeah, I
San
remember you took
Francisco.
like was like the Uber, the expensive Uber ride out
Oh,
there.
dude, it's like $100 Uber or something with Shayna. It was like ridiculous how expensive it was to get out there. And then yeah, they have like restaurants on the roof, and like it's wacky town over there, but it was fun.
You ever see the show Silicon Valley?
Yeah, I mean it's 100% like fully like it. It's ridiculous. They had like a macaroni and cheese bar on the roof. They had like a bike shop so you could like get your tires repaired so you didn't have to leave work. It's chaos in there, but kind of fun. Um, but yeah, I don't know. That's what I got, and I'm
These are all
open to
great.
questions.
Do you guys? I see the chat's up to 10. Any questions you guys want to share? Oh, I have a quick question. How do you
Please.
develop your color palettes? Megan wants to know.
Oh, sure, Megan. I just be honest, like pretty arbitrarily. I will definitely reference things that I like. I'll put things into sort of a mood board. Um, I might pin some stuff on Pinterest of tones and colors that I'm sort of interested in. I try not to use the same color. I think I have go-to color palettes, or like I use sort of more desaturated colors, I guess, but I try not to pull the same color palettes over and over. I never save a color palette. Um, but I think the best advice I have to that is I always start super simple. It's usually 3 or 4, maybe 5 colors. Um, and it's usually, a couple complementary and some that kind of hang out in a similar world. And then I'll often build like up and down a little bit from that. I'll give myself a lighter and a darker of whatever colors I come up with. But I try to start super simple. I know that inherently I'll always end up adding colors. I'll always get a little bit stuck and like bail myself out with a couple extra colors. And sometimes I think maybe it's a detriment to me, but I'm really systematic with the way that I work. And so I try to set up rules early where I'm only going to use X amount of colors, and I try not to break those rules until I really have to. Maybe sometimes that's actually not helpful because it might sacrifice the quality of the artwork, but I think that comes from probably screen printing, which is, something I was really obsessed with for a long time, especially early on, limiting your color, the amount of color that you can use. So I start really simple, 3 or 4 colors. And then I expand from there. And sometimes if the colors are feeling a little bit dull or they're just not exciting enough, I'll throw them into Photoshop or something and put like a color balance filter over on top or something like that, and just start tweaking stuff like crazy and just start really playing with the colors. And you might end up getting something interesting that you wouldn't normally use. And then I end up stacking a lot of stuff on top of it. But I always start with a really simple base color palette of 3 or 4 colors.
Thank
you.
You're welcome, of course.
Now,
what else?
Professor Lemon wants to know, when you are engaged by a client, how do you know you budget your time? These are such big projects with a lot of scope.
Yeah. Here's an instance of, let me cancel this call real quick. I'm on Do Not Disturb. What are we doing here? There's a quick little color palette. So I try to work based on, I might be able to stop sharing for now, and I can pop back up after. So I'll usually work based on project fees. I try to work on a value-based structure. So when I'm working with a mom and pop shop, it's very often different from when I'm working with larger clients based on the distribution, the range of distribution, what kind of usage is going to happen, how things are going to be licensed. If it's going to be a Super Bowl commercial, that's going to be different from if it's going to be literally one tweet. And that is kind of the world that I'll be in, is I may license some artwork for a tweet. And then they may come back in a couple of months and say, hey, we want to use that artwork on some t-shirts, or we want to use that artwork for something else. And so I really try to restrict usage on the artwork, as we all should as illustrators, is make sure that we maintain copyright and all that sort of stuff. That being said, time definitely plays into it for sure. I need to make sure I'm at least covering my bases of making, the hourly rate that I want to be making. I try to keep track of the time that I spend on projects as frequently as I can. I use a tool called Toggle, Toggle, or no E at the end. Anyway, it's just a time tracking tool you can use on your phone too or whatever, but I'm not super great at using it. And I've been using it for like 10 years and I really kind of suck at it, but I try to start and stop track time every time I work on something. And that way you just get a historical log of like knowing, okay, typically every time I work on a spot illustration, it's usually taking me 6 or 7 hours, and it helps you kind of estimate down the line when people ask. But at certain points, and Chris Piasek is somebody that's been really helpful for me, sort of graduating my pricing structures from just time-based to like value-based, and making sure that I'm, allocating for the hours that I'm not drawing, but I'm thinking about it in the back of my head and those sorts of things. So and this is a wishy-washy answer that doesn't give you any clear things, but it's just, I don't know, it's a tough one to answer.
But just to be clear, you're giving a quote for the job. You're not charging the client by the hour, but you're using
Correct.
what you expected hours to formulate your quote.
Exactly, John. Yeah, couldn't have said it better. And I didn't say it better. You
No,
said
no,
it
I know
better.
you. I just didn't know. I wanted to be sure that was came across.
Yeah, I would say in general, I've never done any hourly work. I early on, I've probably, come up with my estimates based on some hours, but even then I've sort of kept a barrier between what that is. But that's not true. There's been times where I've done hourly work, but I would say 5% of my jobs or 10% of my jobs, I always come to them with a project rate. Um, and that helps kind of prevent creeping in the scope, and it helps expectations of them. And sometimes you win, sometimes you lose, sometimes you end up spending way too much time on something and you realize, and then you learn the lesson. Hopefully you tracks the time to remember it or something.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you can't stop doing good work because you're spending too much time
Yeah,
because it's your name. The people who see it at the end don't know that you spent 15 hours versus 2 hours. They just see your name and it's your work, and that's what you got to protect.
yeah, was it Yuko Shimizu, I think, when she visited our class, she said something like, once you agree to the project, you're all in. Like, what, it doesn't, like, you can negotiate like crazy with the money all you want at the beginning, and you should, but then once you're kind of in, you give it everything you got. And that's definitely the way I try to see it. Is there's times where I'm like, oh, I'm definitely not making the money I should be out of the time I'm putting in, but I said I'm going to do it. I'm not going to do a bad job. So yeah, once you're in, you're in. For better or worse.
Do you just want to look through the chat and just pick any questions that you think?
Yeah, type away, everybody, if you've got anything, and obviously no pressure, but also no stress. And
I did
if you
notice
think of
that
something later.
Sarah asked about the tools you like to use for
Oh,
line,
cool.
color, and Illustrator.
Yeah, help me out because I'm
Um,
not only not great at reading, but I'm
is it
panicking.
705?
Okay, well, that's a good way to. Sarah, tools to use Illustrator. So tools, I use a ton of the pen tool. Um, Depending on the style that I'm working in, if it's like more organic and kind of whimsical, it's usually just everything's pen tool. If I'm doing something that's more, gridded and, geometric, I'll use a lot of shapes and stuff like that. And then I use the Pathfinder a ton, which is just the tool that combines shapes and subtracts shapes. Yeah, think of it as like cookie cutters. Um, that's mainly it. And then, the color stuff, I just grab my colors, and then I use a lot of the ink dropping. I think it's called the ink dropper, where I just can drop color onto colors or grab colors, and I just push and pull color with that. And then otherwise, like, I don't really touch a lot of stuff. I learned a lot of it because every once in a while, I'm trying to come up with maybe a shoelace or some sort of shape that's kind of hard for me to draw. And I can remember if I use like a certain filter, it'll turn it into, a certain thing. But yeah, I mean, basically just a pen tool, everything like crazy, and then just use really primitive things. I think most things are pretty primitive the way that I work, I think. What else? Develop color palettes.
Well, yeah, I think you got. I'm not seeing anything you missed.
Yeah. Some collaborations have been pretty game changer for me. I think another like big thing is just like meeting friends and making friends, like building a community where you can is definitely the best thing that's come from social media for me. Is definitely, I mean, it's great to have a career. It's hard to know how much you can attribute to social media. I mean, I always try to ask clients where they found me and stuff like that, but the biggest thing for me is like just finding friends and like being able to talk and calling people up about pricing, like almost daily. I'm like calling people and I'm like, what the heck do you think I charge for this thing? It's going to be on a billboard and all that stuff. So friends are really handy to have. Um, and asked about my studio space. Yeah, so I'm in, oh, my camera's here, but I'm in this big studio space that's in Lowell, Massachusetts,
Oh, huh.
and it's a big old paper mill. And there's like 300 studio spaces here. A lot of like painters and ceramicists. There's like fashion designers, like everybody, any sort of different type of craft is here. And right now I'm obviously by myself up here in my little studio. Sorry, I'm not looking at you. But I'll have friends come, as much as I can. Pandemic has obviously put a major halt to that, but trying to have friends come by and collaborate, even work on their own things just in a similar space is super handy for me, and fun. The space is too big for me, so it's just like I've got desk space everywhere. Like anybody can come by and hang out and work.
Do you try to avoid working at home? I know some people like to really separate, like when they're home, they're not working. When they're working.
Yeah, I did. I got the studio space when I decided to quit my full time. So like 5 years ago. At the time, I was living, with my partner and two dogs, and there's like just a lot going on. It helped me to have this separate space. I will work at home maybe once a week or once, every 7 or 8 days or something like that. I can, um, but I'm really comfortable here. I really like it here. So it's been helpful for me to have the separate space. I like keeping it clean, but every once in a while, it's nice to just sort of leave things everywhere and not worry about it and come back in the morning and everything is where it would be. So, but for me, it's. I think it's also just a pride point. Like I like having it. It makes me feel good. Um, and the space here is plenty cheap. It's not Boston rates, so it's affordable to keep. And every once in a while, clients will come by, and it's fun for them to see. But it's not. It's basically just me in here with my headphones.
Oh, cool, huh?
Yeah.
That must be fun. I'm friends with a bunch of illustrators who live in northern Massachusetts. Like I'm in southern Vermont and just right on top of and there's some old textile mills that are converted to studio spaces, and it seems pleasurable to be around other people when you're working. Just kind of have a little human contact must be.
Just yeah, even some background noise, just like hearing some chatter can be handy. And yeah, it's there we keep looking around at like homes and stuff like that, and every time we start getting up into Maine and Vermont and stuff, there's always these big beautiful barns and studio spaces and stuff up by you, John, that I want a big backyard barn to work in sometime eventually, I think.
Well, we have a barn that I thought was going to be my studio at some point. It's still just a barn, but it's just like these big things are
Give me a pair of
expensive,
hands, I'll be up
falling
there.
down. I mean, it's always you always fix the one thing that's about to collapse.
Right, rather than
It's always
installing
green.
new floors. But yeah, I mean, it's a great idea. It's just it's always a good idea in theory. So you have to do it, and then winter comes, and then you have to wait 6 months.
Oh, you got to rake the roof. You got to rake the snow off the roof so the thing doesn't collapse. So, the schools in Pennsylvania. So everyone down there is in normal times I go back and forth, but this semester hybrid. So I'm obligated to be there 30% of the time, and I'm home 70% of the time. So it's
What were you doing when you were going? You would go and just stay?
yeah. I rent a room. There's a nice landlady who rents me a room and play with
Oh,
her,
cool.
and it's pretty yeah, it works out pretty nicely.
That's cool.
Last year I stayed with I rented a room with a couple of rugby players. So part of the frat. I was the old man in the frat house or something. They were cool. But yeah, no. John sleeps on the roof on our bar. Yeah, I do. They let me in from the cold.
Yeah, like Snoopy.
Well, anyway, thank you. I get if no more questions, we'll let you go. I didn't know you had to go home in the cold and from Lowell. But thank you for spending so much time with us and showing us all your stuff. It's really been an honor.
Well, thank you for having me. Anytime. Happy to, help, and thanks for listening and being patient with me. And Yeah, John, I'm happy to whenever you need me, I'm around. You
Oh,
just
great. Well,
let me
that was
know and I'll pop back in whenever you need.
well. You inspired me. I'm sure you inspired them too. So
Cool.
great and great to hear. These are stuff
Just the smart objects was worth the price of admission. I don't know why I never thought of doing that.
It's a
Tell
game changer.
everyone. Totally. And I also
Yeah,
like your little dot palette thing at the bottom too. So thanks a lot.
beautiful. Thanks, Anne. Thanks everyone. And yeah, I'll hop off and just let me know when you need. John, I don't feel any sort of way about putting this up on YouTube. I don't think I said anything that I shouldn't have said. So
Oh,
do
great.
what you want to do. Please send me a link when you're done.
Yeah, sure. Well, thanks so much, Kirk. I'll do that. I'll share with
Cool.
the class and see it.
Okay. Bye, everybody.
Take
Thanks for
care.
your time.
Bye, Kirk.
See you soon, John. Bye-bye.
Okay, might as well stop recording now, I guess.